Our reality is stories within stories within stories. And self-enquiry means realizing this. It means looking into the stories which constitute our fundamental beliefs and realizing their nature as stories. And once we realize their nature as stories, we no longer forget that. We no longer get caught up in them. And this is why we hear stories of cosmic dissolution so frequently in the Yoga Vasistha. It means we can no longer get caught up in that world. The reality of that world is no longer available for us to forget ourselves in. And some of these stories are subtler than the rest. This is represented by the elements in the Yoga Vasistha. We have the earth element, then the water element, and so on. And these represent subtler levels of stories which are brought to an end by the particular elemental cosmic dissolution. So we had the story of King Vipashchit, who became Bhasa, the shining one. This is the shining of self-enquiry. And Bhasa was escaping from one cosmic dissolution brought about by the destruction of the earth plane. He was saved by the fire god, who starts telling him about the nature of that particular dissolution. And we get involved in a story about the sage and a hunter, and the sage starts telling about his own inquiry, and this leads to dissolution by flood, by water. And while he was witnessing the great flood of cosmic dissolution, he found himself in a different story, which was eventually destroyed by fire. And then he practiced the wind contemplation. In other words, he started identifying with air. So he moved on to a different level, an altogether subtler level. Now, air is sometimes regarded as analogous to awareness. So perhaps when he was practicing the wind contemplation, we can understand that he was taking refuge in the nature of his own awareness. The sage continued, "Though I was surrounded by that terrible fire there, I was not unhappy at all. When you know while dreaming that it is dream only, you are freed from even fire." Sometimes when you have an awful dream, it forces you to realize it's only a dream. And perhaps it's the case with some individuals when faced by trauma and disaster. Something new is awakened in them. While I was investigating the nature of the fire, unaffected by it because I knew the truth that it was dream, a dreadful heat wave arose. In that gale, everything began to fly around and to get totally burnt. It was like the dance of destruction. I began to wonder, after all this is only a dream dreamt by me while I am living in someone else's heart. Why should I not get out of all of this instead of witnessing this suffering? The sage had entered into somebody else's body. And this is what we do every night when we dream anyway. Perhaps it's what we've done right now. Is the sensation that you have right now of being in a body any different to the characters that you find yourself in when you're dreaming? The hunter asked, "You had entered that person's heart in order to know what dream was. Why did you decide to pull out? Did you find out the truth?" The sage replied. This was the reason why the sage entered into this other person's being, in order to find out the nature of dream. Why should the sage have pursued that course of action? Why should entering into somebody else's body and mind, help understand the nature of dream. And the essence here of the nature of dream is that it appears as an external world. When you're dreaming, you relate to the world the same way you normally relate to the world. It's only afterwards that we dismiss it as a dream. But at the time, you're in an external reality. No matter how absurd it seems afterwards, at the time it's all perfectly normal, perfectly natural. It isn't clear what the sage's logic is in entering another being in order to answer this question. Although I suppose we could see it as a scientific way of going about it. It's tricky to examine directly what is going on with oneself, so if possible, you direct your attention outwards. You do an experiment and you observe for yourself what is happening in somebody else's consciousness. Perhaps that's the reason. Perhaps that's the understanding behind it. But it seems that the sage has come back to his own awareness, both in the sense of identifying with the subtlest of elements, although the subtlest of elements is really space. Perhaps we can take air for space. And also, by entering into this other person, he's having to be reminded of his own nature once again. This is what the cosmic dissolution is each time. It's not letting him look any further in that direction. He has to come back to himself. And this is what happens next. We get realization of the nature of creation and the nature of consciousness.